Sometime between the end of the VF's life and the beginning of the ZB production run, the Holden Commodore became middle-aged and boring. Not all middle-aged people are boring, obviously. There is a specific type of middle-aged person that can be boring. I'm talking about the ones that go into Mexican restaurants and actually answer, instead of saying thank you, with gracias. That's the type of middle-aged boring the Holden Commodore became. And that wasn't a good thing. Commodore sales peaked in 1998, selling over 94,000 cars in Australia that year. Come the end of 2019, and Holden have sold less than 5,500 of the imported ZBs. And as such, in 2020, the Commodore will cease production after nearly 43 years. First off, before we get into the topic of today's video, can I ask you all to press a respectful capital F for the Commodore? I'll give you a second to pay your respects. Done? Okay. Well, basically, this means that supercars are knee-deep. Over the past few years, manufacturer after manufacturer have been dropping out of supercars. At the height of the Car of the Future regs, we had 5 manufacturers competing in the series. Going into 2020, we have 2. The Holden Commodore is going to remain in supercars competition until the end of 2021, but after that, GM hasn't committed to anything. The only car that GM has left that is eligible for supercars is the Camaro, but there's no guarantee GM are actually coming back after the Commodore is dropped. Apparently, Walkinshaw Andretti United are in talks with BMW about possibly bringing the M4 in, but there aren't any guarantees around that. Even if that does happen, assuming the Camaro is not entered as a replacement for the Commodore, what we'll be left with is a Mustang spec series with 2 BMWs on the grid. Now, I know there are die-hard Holden fans out there that hate the Mustang, and there are die-hard Ford fans out there that hate the Commodore, but I feel in supercars at least, Holden and Ford kind of need each other to make the competition interesting. So, the future of the series remains in the hands of Chevrolet and BMW. I'm not going to pretend to be a supercars expert. I'm a casual fan at best. Mind you, 2019, I have watched more supercars racing this year than I have any other year. But I tend to watch Formula 1, IndyCars, sports cars, etc. But you don't necessarily need to be an expert to see that the series is in trouble, and there's seemingly no plan to deal with it right now. 2021's not that far away. Some people have suggested that supercars switches to an existing type of touring car, such as the next generation touring car platform, but I don't think that's a good idea because there aren't enough V8s in them. I do actually have an idea, and I want to run it past you guys. I think the Car of the Future regs, and even Gen 2 and Gen 3 supercars regs for that matter, were created for an era that no longer exists. An era in which the Ford Falcon and Holden Commodore were made in Australia, were selling reasonably well, and actually still existed. I think that instead of trying to resuscitate this dying formula, supercars just needs to start over. I think that an entirely new formula should be created where supercars becomes more silhouette than touring car, kind of like DTM and Super GT. I think inspiration should be taken from the Mark Cars Mustangs you see racing at the Bathurst 12 Hour. Instead of developing cars and race engines to fit on the spec chassis, supercars should keep the spec chassis but only get manufacturers to design the bodies. I think that the specialized engines developed by the manufacturers themselves should be ditched for simpler crate motors from Cosworth, Gibson, or whoever it may be. This, I believe, will significantly cut costs. Supercars cost around $600,000 per car, whereas the Mark Mustang is estimated at around $320,000. A supercar's engine is $130,000, while a Coyote crate motor in the Mark is $40,000 and can run for 12,000 kilometers. If the manufacturers are only responsible for developing the bodies rather than most of the car, it's a lot less of a trek, so to speak, for manufacturers to come in. Picture this: a Ford Mustang racing a Chevy Camaro an M4, a Mercedes C63 Coupe, an Audi RS5, or even an Aston Martin Vantage. All of these cars could be based on one chassis and one engine. Some of you may moan and complain that they're nothing like the normal road cars on which they're based, and it's not proper touring car racing. Granted, but then again, current supercars are nothing like their road-going equivalents. Some of you will probably poke holes in this idea and call it stupid, but as a race fan, this idea can't be any worse than the alternative, being a Mustang Spec Series. I get that the Falcon Spec Series works in Oz NZ, which is the Supercars championship we've been covering on Project Cars 2, but I don't think it could work in real life. Anyway, that's gonna do it from me. What did you guys think of that idea? Could it save Supercars? Is it stupid? Do you have a better idea? Let me know in the comments below, and I'm interested to see what the community thinks of this idea. So like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.